Up until very recently in the history of Gran Turismo Sport Mode, the 2013 GTR was one of the all-time best Group 3 cars. Updates and new cars have made it all but entirely obsolete, until this week. Frequently the absolute meta on various tracks, an update shortly after GT7 was released brought the 2018 GTR, which immediately replaced the old 2013, and at various times even the Bo Suzuku meme car, the Silhouette, which was added later, was more viable in certain combinations. Enter the Red Bull Ring. The unique shape and length of this track means that not only are there 3 meta cars for the race this week, but none of them are the meta absolutely anywhere else. It also means that this 2013 GTR finally has a chance to show its teeth after many years of obscurity. In the middle of the week, while still testing various Group 3 cars in Race C, I was informed by my friend Calster that the 2013 GTR was somehow viable. He was able to run low 29s in race pace, a time that some of the faster guys were doing in the meta car. I immediately jumped on to try it, and while I struggled initially, the pace started to come slowly. I realized quickly that this may be the only chance this car ever has to shine again, and it would be the perfect candidate for the next car in my series of the forgotten race cars of GT7. I knew from testing this car in the Deep Forest race a couple weeks back that this car suffered from massive tire wear issues, and despite the fact that the tire multipliers this week are pretty low, running a long stint on the medium compound would probably net poor results. Calster also mentioned he liked to pit somewhere around the 3rd lap, I believe, and it became clear that I would have to wait until after the first couple of laps to maximize the strategy. The reason this could be an issue is because the most powerful strategic trick of this week when starting from the back is to pit on the very first lap, undercutting anyone that would pit on lap 2 or 3, and getting clean air and track position, making up for the slight loss in pace at the end of the race. Luckily for me, however, many people ended up adopting the lap 1 pit strategy, and since so many people would then be fighting even after going to the pits, staying out longer on the first stint was actually more beneficial at times for this race. Since I had not gotten a really good race with this car yet this week, I decided to jump in at midnight my time, which is about 8 AM in a lot of the EMEA region. This also meant that I knew none of the people I'd be racing against, so giving this guy a bump to express goodwill seemed like a good idea. Moving onto the outside into turn 2 is pretty much always risky, but being able to avoid the concertina effect of all the cars stopping on the inside line meant I could sometimes gain many positions. The move did not pay off, as the guy who had initially tried to help along after turn 1 decided he was going to deliberately push me off the track. Trying to fight the urge to rage and get revenge, I was going to move behind him until I saw that the Beetle had a very good run, and I decided to just wait it out and see if I could get by without ruining anyone else's race. As he avoided the chaos that had occurred somewhere in front of us, I found myself moving ahead of him, and while he initially made contact again, he seemed to back off. I'm not sure if he was worried he would be pushed off or if he felt remorse, but luckily, I found myself many positions ahead of where he had pushed me into the grass. I know some people will suggest that he did it on accident, so here's a look at his perspective and his inputs. As he breaks into turn 2, he's very cautious not to run into anyone in front of him. With me clearly on the outside, no matter what view he uses, he could absolutely see me, and instead of even pretending to give me space, you can see him turn directly into me to push me off. If you're unaware, the red dot above the digital tachometer is steering input, and if you watch back, you can see he very clearly pushed me off on purpose. Either way, that was the end of that story. I just wanted to get ahead of anyone trying to defend him. Because of the chaos as well as his weird choices, I found myself with a ton of clean air, which very much helps me on this strategy. While avoiding the pit on lap 1 can help stay away from the traffic, it's impossible to know what other people will do, and if people directly in front have the same idea as me, it would greatly slow me down. With the next closest guy going to the pits now, I could focus my pace on the slower tire, and I would be on track to hit the pits before getting to the traffic and possibly overcut those who pit early. One lap ahead, and I found myself perfectly in a vacuum of space between cars. Looking at the radar, it started to become very clear that I dodged a bullet by avoiding the early pit. My pace in the hard tires was already faster than many of those who were now on mediums, and adding the effect of heavy traffic to that, it appeared my overcut strategy was going to work swimmingly. As I came out of the pits, it was starting to look like I would once again be in 11th place, and while that may seem like I only held on to my position, I was willing to bet some of the people who I had passed already were on the wrong strategy. Starting on mediums for the long stint, or better yet, an equal length strategy, unaware they could stretch their medium tire length much longer. With this Beetle on the outside coming out of turn 1 threatening to take my perfect 11th position, I knew I could brake later and still make the corner since I had less momentum, so all I had to do was make sure I could rotate the car, give him space, and let the GTR's 1 strength take over. You see, the main reason the Evo, WRX, and Beetle are all so good here is the acceleration with limited length straights. Right before the power cars can take an advantage with their higher top speed, the braking zones kept them in check, and the very last remaining positive about this GTR is the acceleration. Despite the fact that the Beetle probably has even better acceleration, I was able to beat it to that apex and get the power down, quickly putting space between us. The very next car also had a full second penalty, and being this close to him, as long as I kept pushing cleanly, I should be able to clear him before he finished his penalty. With 3 laps completed on the hard compound, I didn't have to worry about tire preservation with this car at all, so I knew I could maintain my pace until the end of the race, assuming I don't get into any shenanigans again. While I was initially unsure if I'd be able to get in front during the time he served his penalty, it ended up being very cut and dry, and I could now focus on setting quick laps until I reached the next driver. Or so I thought. While being foolish and looking in my rear view, I ended up going very slowly, and he ended up being aggressive, so I just narrowly avoided a nasty collision going into the next lap. That luckily meant his run into lap 5 was even worse than mine, but in the meta Evo, if I wasn't quick enough to put some distance between us, I knew his aggression could mean I would lose the position or end up in a long and drawn out battle. As I jumped and bounced over the curb on turn 1, it became very obvious that I still had some kinks to work out in my mastery of this old Nissan, but luck was still at least a little bit on my side as I avoided both spinning and the dreaded turn 1 penalty. I was very much not yet in the clear, however, as he was only a half second behind in a much faster and more capable car. After poorly negotiating what I considered to be one of the best corners for this car and seeing him just as close, if not even closer, I knew I had to lock in and nail the third corner. For whatever reason, be it the acceleration, grip, or ability to rotate when grabbing a lower gear, turn 3 seemed to be even better for me in this car than turn 2. Finally locking in, I nailed turn 3 much better than the previous 2 corners, and I found myself able to relax a bit and stop looking in my mirrors. I took the chance to notice the gap ahead was 1.8 seconds and tried to ignore the guy behind and trust that my pace could carry me away. Just a half lap later, at the beginning of lap 6, I found myself already in the 29s and half a second closer to the target ahead. Still gun-shy from the previous lap's turn 1, I decided to try to turn in later and get on the throttle heavier, but missing the apex entirely caused me to use more steering angle, and instead of adjusting my throttle accordingly, I just punched it, like a genius. While this penalty was clearly going to set me back quite a bit, I was at least comforted by the fact that I put so much space between myself and the guy behind and closed in on the guy in front. Fully within the slipstream of the man ahead and far away from the one behind, I continued to put my head down and focus on my pace. On a lot of different tracks in GT7, the half-second penalty can be absolutely devastating. Some of them are in the beginning or middle of long straights, but luckily for me, the penalty zone here leads directly into a braking zone, which makes the half-second penalty much less harsh. 1 lap later, and I was deep in his slipstream. With the pace that I was catching him, as well as the effect of the slipstream, it looked like I was going to be in position to make a move on turn 2. After turning in too early, followed by turning in too late, I decided to stay cautious and just try to carry momentum through, letting the draft effect help me up to the next corner. Finally making it through at the perfect time, I was now poised to make a move, but I wasn't quite sure what to do. An outside move would be more dangerous, but it gave me more options. I'm not sure why he turned into me, but I think that caused him to miss his brakes, which meant the old switcheroo would be perfect. And thanks once again to the insane acceleration of the GTR, I was able to take the perfect position going into the strongest corner. Admittedly, I was afraid he hit me on purpose to destabilize me going into the corner, and if that were the case, he would probably not hesitate to dump me into the sand on turn 3, so I hugged the inside and just hoped for the best. As he moved wide to take the optimal line, I moved with him and was able to take the corner uncontested. However, that meant that I had to defend in the next corner because he was still right on my tail. Luckily, I was able to take the inside line once again, and this time when I got ahead, I also had a run and was no longer in danger, at least for the time being. I've discussed this a bit before, but with the custom slipstream effect, dirty air is less dirty and the slipstream is much stronger, so despite the fact that I was able to catch him multiple times in a couple laps even without the slipstream, as long as he stayed within my draft range, he was going to be a threat. Many drivers can use this to their advantage, but one thing that seems to catch people out when they don't have a lot of experience with it is how much faster they end up going into corners. In certain conditions, this causes them to carry too much speed into corners, which ruins their exit. While Greco was still close, you can see he's falling back just a little bit each corner, whereas someone with more experience in that car would be able to time it better and get all the way in front of me leading into turn 1. Again, you can see him getting very close leading into turn 1, so close in fact that he has to delay his throttle even more. If he took that corner the same way and I wasn't there, he would still be carrying too much speed into the corner, which would ruin his exit and subsequently ruin the rest of his lap. Since I was there, it compounded, and that led to him losing much more ground on me before the next corner. Once again, he brakes just a little too late, so after getting to 4/10 before the braking zone, it expanded to nearly 6/10 after the corner, only this time I also had slipstream from another car ahead. Unsure what kind of incident the car ahead had suffered from, I was happy to have his slipstream, but since I didn't have a chance to observe his pace, I wasn't sure what kind of moves to make. There was a chance that he was only here because of some kind of mistake, and his pace was actually as good as or better than mine. If that were the case, I would choose to bump draft and work with him to get a good buffer between myself and Greco behind. I'm not sure what caused him to go slowly out of the last corner and then still try to race me into the next, but I wasn't going to give up an opportunity for a free track position. My hope now is that he would battle Greco, and that would give me free reign to not worry about defending and just work on moving closer to the drivers ahead. Worst case scenario, however, would be those two realizing they're both in the meta car and bump drafting together to try to overtake me. One lap later, and not only are they both within my slipstream range still, but the guy ahead has a penalty and it looks like I'm going to end up right next to or behind him as soon as he's finished with it. But to my surprise, it turns out he's one of the drivers who's not yet pit. For the brief moment I was ahead of him, I lost the delta between myself and the man who had been chasing me the last lap, and to my dismay, he was even closer than before with a small enough gap to pose a threat in the next lap. My initial concern appeared to be true. He was not in that position because of his pace, it was some kind of incident. So now I had to be absolutely on the ball to ensure I could stay in front of him. If he ended up fast enough, I was going to have to focus on the long game, potentially giving up the position and trying to help him so we can both go faster in an attempt to get in front of those who hadn't pit yet by the end of the pit cycle. As he closed in, I had to trust he wouldn't dive, as I was worried that defending would make me too slow in this next corner if he wasn't. As I came out of the corner, it seemed I had made the right choice, and the gap between us started to grow again. Trusting that I didn't have to worry about a dive from a few tenths back, I continued to take my normal line, hoping that my consistency would net me the reward of losing him. As has been the case the entire race, I was very confident in turn 3 in this car, so I knew if I could nail it, I could feel a bit more comfortable leading into the second half of the track. While he initially looked to be disappearing a bit into the rear view, the gap stayed pretty consistent, but by now it had been nearly a full lap of the same gap, and I was starting to get more comfortable with only him behind. Leading into turn 3 on the next lap, we were pretty much the same distance from each other, but as I exited as I had before, it appeared I was able to break away just bit by bit. At the beginning of lap 13, I had maintained the extra couple of tenths from turn 3 in the previous lap, and looking in my rear view, it appeared he had made yet another mistake. That quick glance showed that he had a full second penalty, but the penalty from the mistake we just witnessed wouldn't have hit yet, and that second look back confirmed it. He now had a full 2 seconds and would officially no longer be a threat unless, of course, he ran directly into me. Luckily, he completely missed, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't doing that on purpose. I don't think it was desperation either. I think he probably just didn't realize that he had dirty tires from going so far off, and since he did go so far off, he probably carried a little bit more speed. Jumping to the middle of the penultimate lap, I knew I wouldn't be overtaking the man in first place as he was nearly 26 seconds ahead and the pit loss was only about 23 seconds. I had absolutely no clue about any of the other 5 people between us, however. Seeing the second place guy also go in around the same time, it was a few seconds until the third place guy went in. It appeared I was going to be able to come out ahead of Winkler, but I was unsure about the others. Seeing Min Verstappen, who had the fastest lap, miss the pit meant that he would also be added to the list of people I would definitely be behind, but it appeared I would be able to pass everyone else in the pits. Unable to focus on any other arrows coming out of the pits on the radar, I had to navigate turn 1 just one final time to ensure I could beat anyone coming out next to me in a drag race to the finish. Luckily for me, I was right about Winkler, and 4th place was solid for me. There was always a chance that any of the 3 ahead could spin, or that Min Verstappen had forgotten to pit, but those were unlikely, and I had already accepted a solid 4th place after starting dead last in 15th. As I navigated the last corner, I thought about the various battles and bits of luck I had after being pushed entirely off the track on the first corner of the race. To my delight, I was also the only non-meta behind 3 of the fastest car on the leaderboard. The 2013 GTR got to shine one last time, and I was happy to help it do so.